So we're going to start work on the top slide today, and first thing I'm going to do is something which I didn't do at the start, which is something that I normally do with most of my textures, and that is to create what I call a selection layer. I kind of made that name up myself, but basically what it is a layer with nothing in particular on other than sort of a guide to help us select different areas of our texture. And to do that, I'm just going to go to our very bottom layer, and I'm just going to select the black, which is basically not part of the texture. And then I'm going to do select, modify, contract, and I'm just going to contract by about 2 pixels. So what we've done, what I'm going to do now is just Control-Shift-I. That will invert the selection. I'm going to do select a white. I'm going to press Shift F5 to fill and then hit OK. And now you can see that's basically filled all of the area which we're actually going to apply texture to. And actually, sorry, I wanted to do that on a new layer. So Shift F5 on a new layer. Control D to deselect. I'm just going to rename it selection. So what it means is if we want to work on, say, the top slide, which we're going to work on, I can select the magic selection tool up here, and just on the selection layer I can just select this section of white. Now as you can see, I get the marching ants around the top slide, or I can do again on the plastic trigger area here, or the barrel clip, certain areas like that. I think perhaps doing no, I think that would do. I was going to say that maybe contracting by 2 pixels was maybe a little too many, because a lot of areas are all joined up, but okay. Right, as you can see, I've just done, that's the barrel area, which I've already been flicking through just after I've done the clip. Very much the same technique. The only thing that I need to do now is do the whole blue colour. So I can use my selection layer at the bottom here to select the barrel. I'm just going to use my marquee tool, hold down Alt just to get rid of this little section that we don't want. I'm going to go to our overlay layer up here, the colour overlay. Expand my brush up, make sure I've got a nice soft brush. I'm just going to do some blue along there, and just select some brown on the top and bottom here. That should be it. Control D to deselect. Right. So in this group folder here, I'm going to have all the different parts of the gun. So I've got the clip here, barrel here, and so I'm going to create a new folder. I'm just going to name that top slide. Go to our selection layer, going to get my wireframe back up, use my magic selection tool just to select my top slide area, which will include that and that, and this just here. And then with the selection here, I'm going to go on my base layer, Control C and then Control V to copy and paste, and I'm going to drag what we've just pasted into, not our barrel, into our top slide. So now this gives us the top slide area to work on. So as before, we're basically going to use dodge and burn to produce the highlights and lowlights. I'm going to start with making sure I've got a soft brush. I'm going to go to brushes. I'm going to put a slight bit of scattering on, maybe around 10%, very low amount. And where we want highlights are along these edges here. which represent these curves along here, where where it curves from the vertical to the horizontal. We're also going to want highlights around these little edges here. Again around here. And going to want some highlights along these grips or whatever, I don't know what they're called. First off, something I've nearly forgot to do, I was going to put the exposure down to 5. And one way to make a gun a little more interesting is to have sort of slightly lighter at the back and darker, lighter at the front, darker at the back. So I'm just going to use my brush on an exposure of 5. And I'm just going to very lightly just lighten up the front. I'm going to go to the dark, exposure on 3, and I'm just going to darken up the back. Not too much though, you don't want to go too over the top. Go back to my dodge tool, go to exposure about 15. Put my brush size right down with the square brackets. Grab my guidelines back up, and I'm just going to start doing the highlights along the corner. So what I'm going to do is press here, hold down shift, and drag all the way across. Same for the top here, hold down shift, drag across. Actually no, I'm going to have to do it from here. Hold down shift and drag. And then along here as well. We didn't want any highlights along this little section here. No. So the one part will give us a good indication of where we need to do the highlights. So we can basically turn off the guide and work from there once we've got the base done. We could also turn the opacity of the guide right down to maybe 5% to give us a better indication of what we're doing. I'm going to basically mush the brush size up a bit smaller to around 7, and then I'm going to go over those highlights. Oh, I'll go back to the right layer. Go over the highlights again. Using a slightly smaller brush size will help to sort of feather the highlights so they're slightly more vivid in the middle and blend out to a slightly less strong highlight as we move out from the middle. Next thing we want to do is start doing some slightly stronger highlights. Actually, first off, I'm just going to select these little boxes here and here. This is where the back sight is, and we just want a slight shadow. Get my brush size a bit taller. Where the sight meets the gun. Oh. Like so. So yeah, I reckon it's time to start putting in some of the highlights on the edge. So I'm going to select here, hold down shift to make a second selection. You see on my cursor there's a little plus, which means add to selection. Holding down alt minus to selection, So holding down shift, I'm going to select along here as well. I'm then going to use the polygon selection tool. I'm going to hold down Alt and I'm just going to remove this little area here. Double tap to finish off. I'm going to go back to my dodge tool. And I can get rid of my guide. Control H to hide. I'm just going to get my brush size down to about 3 or 4. And I'm going to put my exposure up to about 40. And what I want to do, just bump scattering up a touch more, is I want to use the actual scattering to do the highlights. But you only want a very fine highlight. And basically what it does is having the scattering on actually varies the highlight. So you get some slight splotches which are, as you can see, you've got slightly lighter dots, slightly darker dots. And you just want to go around a couple of times. We're basically highlighting all the areas slap bang around the edge. And it's that sort of quite strong highlight which is likely to give you which gives you that sort of metal property, the shininess, the strong specular. So just give it a couple of passes. I'm going to just brush size a bit smaller, put my exposure up to about 16, just basically just doing little dots here and there, just to make some really good strong highlights here and there. And I'm even going in a touch here and there, inwards from the edge, but not too much, you don't want to go too over the top. It's going to go all the way around, so if you look splotches. And it just adds that little extra interest. Right, so that's the sort of bottom area done. Time to move on. I'm just going to button. Use the polygon lasso just to select this slight inwards piece. Just going to go over my burn tool. This line underneath burn. And also around the edge here where it would be meeting where the shadow would be. Right. Now we're just going to work along the top. So again, we're going to make selections as to where we want the highlights to be. And go around. So holding down shift again, I'm going to select all the way around this area here where the little hole on the top slide where the empty shell casings fly out. I'm going to use my polygon lasso tool. Hold down shift. Holding down shift also, so it adds to the selection, but holding down shift also means that you're going to select straight lines. So rather than this diagonal stuff, hold down shift and it's straight. Or there's a 45 degrees there as well. double tap to close it off. That's not very good. So again, we can use our dodge tool. The size about 3 or about 2, I reckon. Hide our grids, and then we just no, I think that would do. So exactly the same as we've done before. Actually, I need to put the exposure back down to about 40. So holding down shift to allow us to select straight lines. And brush size down to 1, exposure back up to 60. Just going to add those extra few little dots as we did before. It's often a good idea to zoom out to 100% to see what your texture's looking like. Sometimes when you're zoomed in a little too much, it can be quite difficult to actually see what you're producing. Ooh. So I just need to do Control-Shift-I to make sure I'm on texture on the outside edge of this selection rather than the inside. And then just holding down shift and then go all the way around the edge. Just tapping on the corners and the edges. Letting the scattering that I put on create the highlight. For the added variation. Just going to go around some of these edges again. My brush size down, put exposure up to 60. And around we go. Right, next thing we want to do is we've got a slight indent on here. Find my glock logo.gif. Click on my references, yeah. Got a slight indent here. So going to want to make a selection. Right, what I'm going to do, create a new layer right on the top. It will get deleted, and I'm just going to make a selection box here. And I'm just going to fill with any colour. I'll just use black. I believe we've got a filter under noise median. Yeah, and what this does is it curves the corners with the as we put up the radius. You see, looks a bit naughty. Oh. Okay, we want to put the radius on about 5. Okay. Control D to deselect, and I'm going to hold down Control, select the layer again, and that's given us this sort of circular selection. Now we want to go back to our top slide, get out our burn tool, and using this selection we can start to create this sort of indent that we've got. Put the exposure down to 5. The exposures I'm using are probably a little bit too high, but it means it's just a bit quicker, not quite so accurate in the long run. So you may want to work with something a little bit lower to make sure that you've got a bit more control over your texturing. There you go. What else we got there? Got some crazy stripes. I'm just going to make another little selection here. And then I'm going to just copy and paste our base layer. Put it over the top slide. And what I'm going to do is on this new layer, this small selection, I'm just going to do a highlight across. I'm going to do just select the layer, holding down Control and clicking on the layer, and then holding down Alt. I can copy these and they will stay in the same layer. Don't really know how many to do. No, I'll do a few. Like so. And then we can hold down Control again, select the whole layer. And then on our downside layer, I'm just going to use the burn tool just to Control Shift I. So I've basically selected everything but these lines. I'll show you again. So nothing selected. Hold down Control and click on layer 5, which will select the layer. Everything but that layer. And then on the Control H to hide that, and I'm just going to do some low lights. Again, that's holding down the Shift key. Like so. Also just need to go around this edge along here with some highlights and with some highlights on the edge. Dodge and burn. Hide the top layer, Control H to hide. Sort of size 2 brush as usual. It's just a matter of finding your edges. Size 1 brush and really just doing some real strong dots as before. You can see how a lot of these highlights are staying to about 1 pixel. I just want to go into these a little more and just a few stronger dots as well. So. Next thing we're going to work on is this little grippy, crazy cracker bit. First of all, we'll just darken up this little section. This is the sort of inside bit, just there. Select it, just there. It'll texture all of them. I'm just going to select that area, darken it up. With my burn tool. Bush. Right. Then I'm going to select all the downwards areas, the ones which are going to have the shadows because they're on the inside. So that's just the square marquee tool and just holding down shift. Right. Hide my guide layer. I can control H as well. And I've got the burn tool. Oh. And I'm just going to go for it. I think that's a little bit big. So what you'll often find is you sort of do one stroke, find out where your edge is, undo, so look, I do a scribble, find out my edges along here, undo with Control Z, and then I can just hold down shift and drag a stroke of darkness. And again, I've got a little bit of scattering on the brush under our brush options. It just makes it slightly more interesting, I feel. There we go. And then I'm just going to make the brush a bit smaller and just make it slightly darker right in place, just to really emphasize the depth, exaggerate it a little touch just to make it really stick out. Like so. And then I'm just going to put the exposure down to about 3 or 5 or so, just slightly darken it up along the bottom. Right, now we need to select all of the opposites, all the up sections. So I've got my grid back, and again, just going through my marquee selection tool. Select everyone. It's quite important that you are quite accurate with the selections, because they're going to help with you getting your highlight straight. Or highlighting in the right places. So once that's done, this one's a little wrong, so I'm going to hold down Alt and get rid of sort of a line of pictures there. Again, both sides on that one actually. And I'm going to hold down Alt and just get rid of all these extra little bits on the top. So, I'm going to change to our dodge tool, get rid of our guide, which in fact, I just want to put a highlight along here. So it's going to hold down shift, drag across. Oh, I got the, yeah, that should have done it. There we go. And just drag across those. So we get that highlight along that edge. Let's emphasise that a little more by going over a slightly larger brush. Right, Control H. So what about the brush size 2? And again, we're just going to do highlights down all these edges, as we have done before. as you can see, I'm sort of pushing the brush about halfway where I want the highlight and half off, if that. So half and half of the brush on the walking ants, inside the walking ants, and half out of the walking ants. So ending up with about a 2 pixel highlight all the way along. Oh. And get brush size down to 1 again, and just, as you've done in the past, just do some extra little spots. Starting to look alright, I think. This last little section here, we just want to darken up. That's the little bit under the gun, which we're not really going to see, so it's not overly important how good the texture is there, as long as it's dark. Right. I think I'll put some writing in on now. I think what we want is 19 Austria, and so I've just selected a text box with black, 19 Austria, 9 times 19, about font size 18. I've got Arial as the font, and some anti-aliasing, whatever you feel looks the best. What I'm then going to do is just select off it. I'm going to put a new layer on. Oh. I'm going to put the text layer above this new layer, and then what I'm going to do now is combine these 2 layers together, which will stop this being a text layer and be more of an image layer, so we can edit it a lot easier. So we're going to make sure the text is above our empty layer. I'm just going to do Control E to combine them together, and now it's a text layer. Oh, that. So what we're going to do now is just use our selection tools, marquee tools, just to move them all into sort of right places. So the 19 is, I think these need to go a little smaller, so I'm going to select those, Control T, and holding down Shift to make sure I do a uniform scale. Just going to scale it down a touch. Control D to deselect. As I move these left and right, I'm holding down Shift to make sure they stay on a straight line. I'm just going to move these across. To be honest, they're probably not in the right places, but I'm trying to get through this as quick as I can. Tutorials, text, no, reference, thumbnails. Right, I've got this image as well. What we're going to do is select the white, Control Shift I, actually allow us to drag black out into here. I'm going to get rid of that, and this just with a rubber or what might be fancy. And I'm just going to get this down to the right size, which we're going to have just on the end of the gun. How big does it want to be? It looks a wee bit big for me. About there. Right, so what we want is these to be slightly indented into the metal. There's two ways that we can do that. I'm just going to combine these two layers together so they're one. One is just to go into our sort of blending options, put a bevel and emboss on, and you can just fiddle about with these. Generally want an inwards bevel, chisel hard, and then you just fiddle about with the depth and things. One way of doing it, which does come out rather nice. Another way, which I normally do it, I will copy the layer, like so, and then I'm going to hold down Control, select this layer, and I'm going to fill it with white, so Shift F5. Okay. And with this layer selected, I'm basically going to use my arrow keys on the move tool here, and I'm going to press it once up and then once to the right, and that will move it 1 pixel up, 1 pixel right. And now we're just going to put the opacity right down, and that's basically creating the highlight. I'm going to put the fill down as well. So as you can see, they all had a very slight highlight now. And I'm also going to put the opacity of the black down because I think it's a little too black. No, you obviously don't want it too light. So the top layer I've got a opacity of about 20 or so. Touch. You want it to try and match your other highlights as much as possible, really. Now I've got the fill on 50, and the other layer just the opacity on 75, the bottom layer. So that's that. Last thing we want to do now is just, that's sort of the base highlights down, and it's just time to start going in and adding all those extra details, really. Details. What are they? Oh, so we've got these layers right at the top here, which we created ages ago. So we've got our speckle, random, scratches 1 and 2, damage, and 2 damage layers. So I'm going to go right back down to the bottom. I'm going to use my selection layer to select the top slide again. And I'm going to deselect these sections that I don't want to be working on right this second. Probably a good plan to get grid on so I can see what the hell I'm doing. Like so. And get rid of that. Yeah, we're going to sort of speckle. And just as before, we're going to use this speckle brush here, the 747 one. And we're just going to do a couple of splotches of speckles about. Nothing too over the top, not a lot. Just a couple of dots here and there. Then we're going to go into the random and just find a nice splotchy random brush. I always seem to use the same one. It does seem the best. Just going to put the opacity of the brush down. Like I said before, you don't want it to be too in your face. I'll just put down a few splotches there. Scratches. Right. I believe this one, what's that, multiply in that screen. So this bottom one are scratches that are going to be painted in black, while the top one are going to be scratches painted in white. So what we're going to do for those, I'm just going to get my size 1 brush out. I'm also going to put on shape dynamics with the size just at 10 pressure. Without this, you can have quite a thick line, which I'll show you now, which is that. With the size jitter on, if you press quite lightly, you see you have quite a thin line in comparison, and you can also have a line which gets thicker. You find that where a scratch starts, it'll be thicker, and then when it comes out, it'll be a bit thinner. But, so sort of, what am I doing? There we go. Right. There we go. So there we go. So it's from thick to thin. And we're just gonna. You don't want to go too mental with scratches. Just a few here and there. Make sure I've got the right layer again. Just areas where you think the gun may have got scratched up a little bit. Nothing too over the top. But it's dependent. I mean, if you want a gun which has obviously been used a lot, you want to put more scratch on it. If you want one brand spanking new, then you don't put so many scratches on it. But gun's been used to fight with, the likelihood of it looking brand spanking new is pretty minimal. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to rub out the scratches which are in these lower spots. I don't think we would see any there. It looks like it's dum over the top. Yeah, on all of them. And this is where we're going to use the slightly darker black scratches. Because where this is sort of jumped over the different sticky out sections, every time it sort of hit here, it would probably hit it quite hard and dig into the metal a touch. So I'm just going to add a few tiny little black marks just in these sections, so it looks as though the whatever has created the scratch has sort of jumped over the surface. You may want to darken up some of your scratches in there. I'm also going to rub out this little section, I forgot about that. Black out again. I mean, let's go around, add a few slightly darker scratches here and there, just give it that slight little bit of depth. Right, this is what I like painting, the damage. So I'm going to get the white out again. What I want is I want shape dynamics on with my size jitter. I also want scattering on. So you've got sort of, it looks like it's slightly chipped away. And I also want other dynamics on, and in here I want opacity jitter on pen pressure. So the harder you press, the thicker it gets. And the sort of whiter it gets. So this means that we can sort of scribble all the different hardnesses, and it will create a really, really crazy pattern. So what we're going to do is just basically work it on some areas where you feel particularly take damage. So on corners such as here, maybe on the bottom corners of these sections, along the bottom, just anywhere where you feel the gun may take damage. So I've got my brush size about one or two, and I'm just going to scribble on damage. Having the opacity jitter on gives you a chance to sort of build up the scratches or the damage as you see fit, really. Basically what the damage is showing is the new unpainted metal which is underneath the paint, or it's the older metal on top. Everywhere where the paint has been worn and scratched off. So I'm just going to go in. And add this detail. And I think I'm going to show you one more quick thing, and that is going to be the end of the metal tutorials. Uh, the last thing is just going to be something to help you do different tones of metal. It's like areas like this, which I believe is the sort of cover for the slide at the top. That, from what I can see on the references I have, is a slightly lighter metal than this on the top. So you can sit and watch me paint some more scratches for a minute. So on the bottom here, the corners are slightly more susceptible to damage, that's for sure. If you're ever unsure, best thing to do is reference, and lots of it. There's plenty of pictures of guns on the internet. You've got to remember that they're quite heavy, they get thrown around a lot. The last thing you're going to be thinking of in a gunfight is how keeping your gun in mint condition, so I'm guessing it's going to be thrown about a lot, in and out of pockets and juggling with them. I mean, it's funny, when you're right zoomed in, the damage you paint can actually look quite a bit of a mess, but then once you zoom out and see the full texture, often doesn't look quite so bad. Just going to scratch up these two corners here. I feel that is somewhere that is likely to take quite a bit of damage. Oh, I've actually missed a small section. I'll do that as well. Highlight just around here. What's good about doing this on a separate layer, as I have done, is you've always got the option to go back and use a rubber just to delete errors that you've made. Or if you're not happy with something, you can always go back and play around. Just going to do a little bit of damage around some of these, some of the lettering. What you've got to remember is that this damage is on a higher layer than your lettering, so it will paint over the top of it. So you want to be careful with that. So because I've got this selection up the top here, I can easily go back to this selection anytime I want. Control-Shift-I. Back to my top slide layer here. It's going to go around the dodge tool as we have done throughout the whole tutorial. And what this really does is helps to emphasize the contrast between this dark, which is down low, with the height of this area higher up, basically. I don't think I explained that very well. Tough. There we go. I think that will do for now. I don't want to work into it too much because it'll take forever. The only other thing we want to do is just grab our colour here, deselect these areas again, and we're just going to do that sort of final touch of adding the colour to our final texture. So brush, we've got this blue up here, which we're going to paint along the top. And then the brown down the side. Grab a brush, nice soft edge along the top there, and then the brown along the bottom. Like so. Whoopsie. Right, so the last thing that I was going to show you is to change the brightness and darkness. Basically, what we can do is using our adjustment layer. I've got a brightness and contrast. I'm going to put a new one in, I think. Control D. For levels. So I'm going to just press adjustment layers, levels. And levels are really good at making slight changes in contrast. So I can bring the whites in closer to the midtones, and I can also bring in the blacks closer to the midtones according to this scale here. So you've obviously got a lot of dark colours because of the scale here. Excuse me. And then we can also move this sort of mid-tone marker along the scale. But basically what we want to do is use that to change the tone of areas of our texture. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill the mask in. I with the blacks. Here we go. So our adjustment layer only actually affects the areas painted white, although you can't actually see what's been painted. So this area here is the only area that is got white on the mask. Double tap here. And now as we move, we change the tone of that section there. And this is how, when I'm texturing what you can't see, this is how I'm going to change the tones of the areas that need slightly different colours. Other than that, generally towards the end of texturing a weapon as well, it's a good idea just to go in with a levels layer which will do everything, just to do some very minute changes. It's sort of just a finishing touch. You know, as you see, it makes quite a big difference, and it just gives you a chance to kind of say, I don't think these bits were light enough or dark enough. And being on an adjustment layer, you can fiddle about with it as much as you want. Sometimes it's just worth generally darkening the whole texture up a touch. Right, I'm just going to file save glock 2, that is. A quick look what it looks like on the model, and then that's going to be it from me today. Glock 2, open. Chug, 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 chug. Okay. Sometimes you may well find that your highlights aren't quite in the right places. For example, along here, they don't seem to be quite on the edge. So what I'm going to do is just go into my edit UV map, zoom into the particular area that's having errors, just turn that off there. So I just want to select these verts. I'm just going to move them accordingly. I think they need to just come down a touch. As you see, it sort of put those highlights in the right position. It may well be the same along the bottom here. So it's just a case of going through and just having a little fiddle about, make sure everything's in the right place. Right. Let's just pull the highlight up a touch. I mean, when you're only working with like one pixel at a time, it does happen quite a lot. There we go. So that's the general idea. Oh, I did miss out a little section, annoyingly, which is just around the top here. So you would want the highlight all the way around the edge, and this section, this lower section here, you'd want a slight shadow all the way around the edge, just to show it's got a bit of depth on it. But, I'm going to do a render with a nice dark background, so it shows off the texture as much as possible. And I'm just going to slam render for you. So that's how she's looking. Next tutorial I'm going to have a look at some of the plastics. That's the main part of the weapon, and then that will be the end. It will be up to you to use what you've learned in these first couple of tutorials to finish off texturing her. Thanks very much.